Konnichiwa. My name is Shyla Ridge, and I am doing an analysis of Okami Kodomo no Ame to Yuki, or, as it's known in America, Wolf Children, Ame and Yuki. This story is written by Mamoru Hosoda. The character design is by Yoshiyuki Sadamoto. The translation is done by Jocelyn Allen. The lettering is done by Tania Biswaz and Liz Blakesley. The art is done by you, and sadly I found out that she has passed away. The publisher in Japan is Kodokawa, and the publisher in America is Yen Press. The length of my comic, or manga as it is known in Japan, is about 546 pages long, but it took me about 2 hours to read it because it is actually a very quick read. Wolf Children is put together in 3 different volumes, but I would count it as a genuine graphic novel because they all go together. It's just like they published it in Japan, and then in America they brought it together and made it into one larger book. And that is determined by where the colored pages are. Act 1 begins on page 1 and ends on page 124. This accomplishes the goal of the story. Act 2 begins at page 125 and goes all the way to page 487. This stretches out most of the book. I had a hard time determining where Act 3 began and Act 2 ended because the ending was a little muddy, but I figured that that Act 3 began on page 487 and went all the way to the end, just 546 pages. But I do believe it does fit the model of goal, conflict, and resolution, but it was just a little difficult for me to find where the resolution was because things kind of went. It would have been maybe the last chapter, but I figured it was a little bit before that. Wolf Children is Hana's story as told through her daughter Yuki. Hana's goal is to do something for her kids and raise her wolf children the right way. And in Act 2, they go through many hardships, like trying to grow crops and getting to school, as she goes to help raise them to be good wolf children. I'd say Wolf Children has a solid enough story arc. The beginning is clear and the middle is pretty long, but it's clear enough. And for the end, like I already said, the end is a little iffy for me because I feel like Ame's transformation from timid child to a grown wolf was really fast and almost uncalled for. So that kind of threw me off and didn't really give me a satisfactory ending. But maybe for some it would be. But yeah, it was a little... I wish it had ended differently. There are 3 primary characters in Wolf Children. Hana, their mother, doesn't really go through much change, but she learns to let go of her kids as they get older. She learns that they can do things on their own and that they don't have to have her anymore. But she still knows that she can be there for them whenever they do need her. Yuki goes from the tomboy wolf child to somewhat girly student. But the one who goes through the most change throughout the story is Ame. As a child, he is timid and wants nothing to do with the outside, but when he gets older, that's all he wants to do. He just wants to be outside. He doesn't want to go to school like Yuki. He loves the outdoors, and it's a great change from when he was younger because he despised everything outside. He saw a lizard and he jumped at it and he wanted to just leave. As I was reading through Wolf Children, I had no problem figuring out where or when in the story I was as I read it. The transitions as they grew older were clear and made sense as we were given narrative to where to where we were headed. We were given narrative to where we were headed. And so the transitions from one age to the next didn't seem so jumpy. And the same also applies to the transitions from a dream, when Hana was having her dreams about her husband giving her advice for her children. That wasn't often, but the transition was clear and I was not thrown off, as she was in a completely different setting, so it made sense. Like, oh, this is a dream. Okay, I see where we're headed. For MacLeod's ideas of transitions for Wolf Children, I found at least one example for each one that I found. For the moment to moment, I found a page where Hana's then boyfriend asks her to close her eyes, and it goes moment by moment. So she closes her eyes and opens them and then closes them again. And this moment, I believe, is a good example of a moment by moment transition in Wolf Children. A good example of number 2, the action to action, is when they're going through the snow running and they turn into the wolves. So here they turn into the wolf and then they roll around and then they keep running. This is mainly used throughout the whole of the book as action to action as they turn to wolves or walk somewhere or something. I believe I found an example of number 3, subject to subject, when Hana is cooking dinner for herself and going through her mind whether or not this guy likes her or not. So I believe that that'd be a good example of subject to subject here in this book. Here I found an example of number 4, scene to scene, where it leaves off with the children asleep in bed and she's like, I'll raise them right. And then the next scene, or actually technically chapter, the kids have grown up. There's a few years past between that moment and the next. They've grown up a little bit. Since Wolf Children is a manga, I figured there would be a little bit of number 5, aspect to aspect. And I believe I found that here, where it shows the outside and it looks like it's snowing, and then it goes to her cup inside, so we assume it's cold. And then in the next page, we have the flowers, like the shrine for her husband, and then it shows her, and then it goes back to outside where it's snowing. And in the next scene, we see them go outside and it has snowed a lot. I wish Texas had snow. I want snow. Just give me snow. I'm jealous. I really want snow. Please give us snow. I believe this page here really makes use of a page as a mini comic, because we're about to see her face being covered by the sheet. And then the next, we see him looking at her. And the next, it's the dialogue, the wolf that hurt you. And that makes us want to turn the page to see what's happening next. And then we get this whole 2-page spread of it was me. But I do believe that the story does make use of the page as a mini comic. I believe Wolf Children does a good job with directional flow. And because it's a manga, it goes from right to left versus American books where they go from left to right. But the way the artwork is set up and the way that the lettering is, I believe it works. As in this page where her finger, the baby holding her finger, it's pointing towards where we need to go, where our eyes need to be pointed, directed. And then we go back up to the next page and everybody, it draws us towards that invisible directional flow. And I believe it really works in this manga. I would suggest this to my classmates because it's something unique. It's a little mix of fantasy and slice of life, like trying to raise the kids, slice of life. Also, reading something from another country is really inspiring to me, as it gets me out of my own worldview and into another sometimes. I would probably not suggest this to my friends because most of them aren't into anything from Japan. And if they are, they don't like to read, they don't have the time, or they strictly watch anime. Even if Japan was out of the question, it's not a story for everyone. I like it because of the way that the childlike wonder is portrayed, But the end is kind of uncertain, and most of my friends wouldn't like that. Since this is a manga, most of the pages in the manga are black and white. And I personally like this style, but as we talked in one of our chats, the beginning of each volume, which there are 3 of, are colored. As we talked about in class, I believe this is to pique interest for people who don't usually read. Another thing that I thought was cool, and I honestly think it might pop up in manga a lot more than in comics, is that when the speaker isn't clear, sometimes a little chibi head, their little chibi head pops up in the dialogue bubble, and then it makes it clear who's speaking, instead of us wondering who is this character, who is this ghost. Fun fact about my book that I chose for this analysis is that it's actually based off of a movie. And I find this strange because usually movies are based off of books, but it's not the case this time. And I actually got the movie after I read the book, and I have proof that I read it, that I watched it after I read it. I got the library book the day that the assignment was created, and I have proof that it was due on the 16th of October 2017, and then I have a receipt that proves that I got the movie after that date. And something interesting about the movie is that it has very little dialogue and lots of scenery. Lots of scenery. To me, the movie was very static. And also, the comic has a lot more personality and it moves a lot more. Now I'd like to thank you for listening to me ramble about a comic book, something I never thought I would do. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.